This gospel reading is very familiar to us Catholics. Apologists quote it, theologians pontificate about it. This is the passage that lays the foundation for the papacy, for Peter as the first pope. You are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of the netherworld shall not prevail against it. I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. But today I want to ask a question that was a real stumbling block for me when I was in RCIA myself. A question that gets asked a lot by Protestants and that many Catholics struggle to answer. Why even have a pope? So to begin to answer this question, we need to first examine a little more closely this gospel passage. First, we need to recognize where they are. They are in a region called Caesarea Philippi. Now, that's a detail that we tend to skim over. But I believe it's absolutely key to understanding the significance of what is happening here with Jesus and his disciples. See, Caesarea Philippi was in the far northern part of the Holy Land. So Jesus and his disciples have at this point ventured away from Jewish land, and they are now in pagan territory. In fact, Caesarea Philippi was the location of a pagan temple dedicated to the Greek god called Pan. At this temple, the Greeks and the Romans believed that they could receive revelations from this false god. Now, with this in mind, let's look at the exchange between Jesus and his disciples. First, he asks them who others say that he is. They respond, well, some say John the Baptist, others Elijah, still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. Then Jesus asks them pointedly, who do you say that I am? And this is where Simon Peter speaks up. You are the Christ, he says, the Son of the living God. And Jesus responds with a blessing. Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my heavenly Father. Okay, so did you catch that? Here they are at Caesarea Philippi, at a place where pagans come to worship a false god, where pagans believe they will receive revelations from that false god. And Jesus asks them here about his identity. And Simon Peter responds, Jesus, you are the Christ, the Anointed One. You are the Son of the living God, the one true God. You, Jesus, are not like this false god, Pan. You're not an idol. You're not a figment of the imagination. You, Jesus, are the true God, the living God. Pan, this Greek god, is a dead god. At best, a nice myth for Joseph Campbell to write about. At worst, a demonic deception. And Jesus responds to Simon Peter, here at this place where pagans supposedly receive revelations from this false god, Jesus says that Peter's revelation does not come from flesh and blood, but comes from the Father in heaven. This is a slap in the face to pagan religion. And Jesus isn't done. He continues, I say to you, you are Peter, you are Petra, rock, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of the netherworld shall not prevail against it. Now again, we've heard this line over and over and over. But I want to point out a few things. First, at Caesarea Philippi, in fact, in that temple dedicated to that Greek god Pan, there was a very deep hole, actually an ancient well, so deep you couldn't see the bottom. And that well had a name, the gate of the netherworld, the gate of Hades. And so, here Jesus is, in Caesarea Philippi, standing outside this pagan temple dedicated to this false god, that is the home to this hole in the ground that is supposedly the gate of the netherworld, the gate of Hades, the gate of hell. And Jesus says, you are Peter, and on you I will build my church, and the gates of the netherworld shall not prevail against it. Peter, you see this temple that's dedicated to this false god? Well, the church that you will lead will outlast this pathetic little religion by 2,000 years. Nobody worships Pan anymore. And by the way, notice that Jesus says that it is the netherworld's gates that shall not prevail. Hell's gates that will not prevail. We don't need to worry about the church's gates. We don't fear hell. Hell fears us. Hell knows that their gates have no chance against the assault of St. Peter's church. Now, I could spend all day on this passage, but I want to get back to that question I began with. Why even have a pope? Why was it God's will that Peter and 255 of his successors, all the way down to Pope Francis, should be vicars of Christ? Why did Jesus deem it necessary to give the keys to Peter? Why appoint a vicar at all? When I prayed the opening prayer for this Mass, I was reminded of the answer. At the start of this Mass, today, we prayed, O God, who caused the minds of the faithful to unite in a single purpose, grant your people to love what you command and to desire what you promise. God, who causes the minds of the faithful to unite in a single purpose. What is our single purpose as Christians? I believe we find the answer at Caesarea Philippi, when Jesus hands the keys to Peter. Peter is the rock upon which the church will be built. The church that will tear down the false gods. The church that will assault the gates of hell. This is our singularity of purpose. Evangelization is our purpose. Telling the world that this is Jesus the Christ, the Son of the living God. And the papacy keeps the work of evangelization moving. I love the image that Bishop Robert Barron uses to describe this. He uses the image of a baseball game. He says that, in baseball, nobody likes the umpire. But imagine a game without an umpire. At first, it could seem tempting, appealing. That is, until the very first close play at the plate. Without an umpire, the game would very quickly devolve into argument over balls and strikes, safe and out. The game, in short, would never end. You discover that you actually do need an umpire. You need someone to call balls and strikes, to make the close call. And once the call's made, we can get on with playing the game. The church is like that. If we spend our time arguing incessantly over this practice or that practice, over this theologian or that theologian, over whether this teaching or that one is right or wrong, if we're spending our time concerned only with our own internal arguments, then guess what we're not doing? We're not evangelizing. And so, we look to the Pope. We look to the Pope as the successor of Peter. We look to the Pope as the vicar of Christ. We look to the Pope as our universal pastor. Because our mission, our singular purpose, is not in here. It's out there. The Pope makes the call in here so that we can get busy out there. Pope Francis himself put it beautifully. He said, when the church does not go out of herself to evangelize, she becomes self-referential. She grows ill. The evils which appear throughout history in church institutions are rooted in this self-referentiality, a kind of theological narcissism. The world cannot afford for us to be a self-referential, narcissistic church. Because quite frankly, folks, this world is dying. Oh, sure, no one worships Pan anymore. But new false gods have cropped up. Well, actually, they're just the old false gods in new clothing. The false gods of money and sex and pleasure. The false gods of pride and power and politics. The false gods of a culture of death, contraception, abortion, euthanasia, capital punishment. This is a world besieged by relativism, besieged by secularism, besieged by the new atheism, besieged by endless isms. And today's gospel, in which Jesus proclaims that the gates of the netherworld shall not prevail, reminds us that it is we who are meant to be the ones doing the besieging. The church is meant to lay siege to the culture of death with the only ism worth evangelizing for: Catholicism. So, question: why have a pope? Answer: because the papacy allows the church to be what she was meant to be. The papacy allows us to be who we were meant to be, who the world needs us to be. And who is that? Evangelists, missionary disciples, those who go forth to tell the truth about Jesus Christ, that He is the Christ, the Son of the living God. We are called to a single purpose: to save the world. You are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of the netherworld shall not prevail against it. Hell's gates have no chance against Peter's church. We don't fear hell. Hell fears us.